operation. It is absolutely
Thank you, thank you.
Go Volcom, go Volcom.
Okay, so while Orange Mart's getting back up and running, let's talk about what is proof of work. How do you actually prove to someone over the internet that you've done real work in the real world? One way you could think about it is like if there was a locked box, and that locked box, had a code lock on it, but no one knew the code. If someone was able to show you what was inside the box, well, then they're proving that they must have cracked the code. And the only way to crack the code was by guessing it, and that takes time and energy. These proof of work, it's like a guessing game. And what we've developed over time is purpose-built computers that compete to guess. The more guesses you make, the more chances you have. I've tried to illustrate that here with two of these, what's called ASIC computers, application-specific integrated circuits. They have different speeds that they make guesses. This one here, 14 terahashes, and this one here is 140 terahashes. So it's kind of like the pickaxe versus the jackhammer. But if we've been developing these computers that are faster and faster at making guesses, why hasn't all of the Bitcoin already been unlocked?
Are you asking me a question?
It was a rhetorical question and then the pause for the next slide, but thank you.
No, it sounded like you were waiting for me to answer that.
Like to have a go at answering that?
Yes, because it's on an emissions schedule, so it doesn't matter how hard you work to get it, you'll always get it at this, unlike a physically mineable object.
Exactly. It has a schedule of emissions, and that's actually created through a mechanism called the difficulty adjustment. So, if you can imagine a four-digit pin, a four-digit pin might take, a few hours to crack with a code cracker, and a five-digit pin would take longer, and a six-digit pin would take longer than that. There's a similar type of adjustment that happens within Bitcoin, and it does it so that the proof of work is only found, the problem's only solved, roughly every 10 minutes. And on top of that, it's every 2 weeks, or every 2016 blocks, that it will make that adjustment to make sure that going forward it's roughly every 10 minutes. And then every 4 years, or every 210,000 blocks, the reward that you get for providing the proof of work cuts in half. Now, one way to illustrate that is if we imagine our one piece of Bitcoin, our one square, and half of it was unlocked through proof of work in the first 4 years. And then of what remained, half of that was unlocked in the next 4 years, because the reward cut in half after 4 years. And then the next 4 years, half of that was unlocked. So we're down here in this little section, 2021 to 2024, and the next halving happens in 2024. And so there's only this little white section of Bitcoin that hasn't been unlocked yet, but that's going to take a very long time. And this is that emission schedule. This was that fair distribution to make sure that all the Bitcoin wasn't just hoarded by the initial people who guessed the answers using their proof of work. You can talk, because I'm actually going to get the stream up and running again. So you guys chat amongst yourselves for a quick second.
There's a lot of people here. There's more people here than come to some Bitcoin meetups. This is awesome.
I mean, it's a lot easier to get like a virtual meetup. Wow, there actually is a lot of people. Wow.
Live again, everyone. Yeah, this is the quick coffee break while we're getting the live stream running.
Nice.
We are live again. Thank you everyone for your patience. Yeah, so a lot of the Bitcoin's already been mined, but also we are nearly 15 years into this, and it was important that it wasn't all just mined in the first month by the people who developed faster and faster computers. So it's the fairest distribution of any asset we've ever seen on Earth, and the main key takeaway is that even Satoshi, even the creator, had to buy and pay for every Bitcoin that he has by doing proof of work, just like everyone else. I have a slide helper now. Thank you, Salad. Let's move to the next slide. Proof of work. It serves two purposes. The one we've just covered is how do we distribute the scarce asset fairly? It helps ensure that it was fairly distributed over time. But another really key purpose that it achieves for Bitcoin is how do we make transfers of Bitcoin permanent? It helps ensure this. In this example here, Alice owns this little blue piece of Bitcoin, and she wants to give it to Bob. When the miner finds proof of work, which happens roughly every 10 minutes, they'll update the state of Bitcoin to show that transfer of ownership, and we'll all use our nodes to just confirm that that was a valid transaction. We'll confirm that, yeah, Alice did have that Bitcoin that she's entitled to transfer to someone else. And we'll double, triple check that the miner who's proposing this new state of Bitcoin has actually attached a valid proof of work. They've actually done the work to win the right to update the ledger like that. Now let's go to the next slide. I am going through this quite quickly. Yeah.
Photo asks what makes an invalid transaction.
So let's say, Fodal, that you broadcast a transaction that says you want to give 100 Bitcoin to Central Salad. Well, if we check that transaction and the place where the Bitcoin's coming from, you say is yours, like you point to 100 Bitcoin on Bitcoin, you point to a section and you claim that it's yours and you want to transfer it to Salad. But if you don't provide the correct signature that proves that you own that piece of Bitcoin, then you're trying to transfer Bitcoin that you don't own to someone else. So we'll all reject that transaction. And not only will we reject that transaction, if the miner who actually tried to include an invalid transaction in their updated block, their updated state of Bitcoin, if they try to include an invalid transaction, they're risking losing that Bitcoin reward that they just spent all that time and energy doing the proof of work to earn. So that's where the mechanism works, where it kind of forces the miners to be honest so that they don't risk losing their reward.
Scando asks, wouldn't the computer have done that?
All of our computers are checking that the transaction is valid, and Fodal's computer would also tell him that he can't broadcast that transaction because it's invalid, he doesn't own that Bitcoin. But that can't really stop him from trying. So that's why we all verify ourselves every single Bitcoin transaction, and we make sure they all have a valid history. I mean, that was all quite a lot of information.
Hello.
It's hopefully hello, welcome. It's hopefully a good starting point for you to learn more about Bitcoin. The main gist of what I was trying to explain today are that there are two key features of Bitcoin proof of work that really helped Bitcoin. The first was it helped fairly distribute the Bitcoin. And the second was it helps make transfers of Bitcoin permanent. The other bit I touched on was how it helps fairly distribute Bitcoin, and that's through the difficulty adjustment mechanism. And if we go to the next slide, there is something else that's awesome about Bitcoin mining. There are some really good societal benefits of Bitcoin mining. The first and most obvious benefit is that because of this technology, we now have sound money. That's what Bitcoin is. It's sound money. It's a scarce asset that there is no central power that controls it. There is no central entity that issues it that can actually make changes to the supply. That supply schedule, that's all predetermined. That can't be changed by anyone. It can't be changed without your permission. You run your node and you check every single 10 minutes that no one's cheating. Now, why is that so important? Well, if you look around the world today, if you keep your wealth, your money in dollars or euro or yen, which is called a fiat currency. Fiat means value by decree. That's literally just an order from the top. You know, someone saying this has value. Well, what else have they been saying recently? We know there was 5 trillion US dollars. Now there are 25 trillion US dollars. They just create more. If you imagine that square we had up at the beginning, that pie, that piece of Bitcoin, I tried to explain that there's only one Bitcoin and it doesn't get any larger. We're actually just unlocking bits of it and dividing it up into smaller pieces. But it all adds up to one Bitcoin. What they're doing with fiat currency, what they're doing with the dollar, is that they're expanding the size of that pie, but they're not giving it out proportionately to what you owned before. So that means you're actually getting what's called diluted. You own less and less of the pie as they create more of it. It's a roundabout little backdoor trick to try and steal your wealth from you. It happens with companies with shares, you get your share ownership diluted, and it happens with dollars. Now, there are two or more really awesome benefits of Bitcoin mining that I'll touch on briefly, and I could talk for those for hours. But harnessing remote or wasted energy, like that's a huge game changer. There is a lot of energy resources in the world that are untapped. There's also a lot of energy that's wasted. Now that we have computers that we can take anywhere in the world, plug them in, and they can utilize that, they can harness that energy and they can monetize it. They can turn it into Bitcoin. The Bitcoin network is effectively paying for that energy. That changes everything. Right now we live in a world where we're constantly trying to catch up with our energy generation needs, and we're investing money when it's too late to try build out generation capacity to meet our growing population. But what we could instead do is go where there is abundant energy already and start developing it, even though there's no population around it to consume it and use it. That's really cool. That means that Bitcoin is paying for the development of new energy generation, and then the population, as it arrives to that city or that place, they can have the energy. Bitcoin is the thing that funded the development of it. And then the third point, which is also really unique to Bitcoin mining, is that the way they use energy is flexible. They provide what's called demand response. During the peak periods when energy demand is really high, imagine a winter storm. The Bitcoin mining companies, these big industrial users of energy, they're not like your normal industrial user of energy. They're not like a company that says, we need this energy because we're doing stuff with it for our clients. We can't possibly sell it back to the grid for people who need it. Bitcoin miners are different. They're like, oh shit, someone else needs the energy. Someone else is willing to pay more than what we contracted to pay for the energy. We'll just sell it to them. And that helps prevent those big peaks in energy prices that really hurt consumers and actually really hurt the environment, because during those peaks, sometimes you have to turn on energy generators that you wouldn't need to turn on otherwise. So the flexibility of Bitcoin's energy use is really quite good for the energy market and the grid, and it actually lowers energy prices for everyone. Sorry, those last 2 points is a lot to talk about, but I will leave it there. thank you all for listening to this Bitcoin talk. And yeah, let's anyone else who wants to talk about Bitcoin jump on up here.
Bitcoin.
Some people call fear false evidence or expectations appearing real.